I was 18 years old the night my parents decided I no longer belonged to them. There was no dramatic build-up, no screaming match, no warning signs that would have made the moment feel earned. Just a quiet dinner, the clink of forks against plates, and my dad clearing his throat like he was about to ask me to pass the salt. Instead, he said my name in that careful, distant way people use when they've already made up their mind. He told me I had embarrassed the family, that I was a liability now, that continuing to support me would only encourage my bad choices. My mom didn't look at me when he said it. She stared at the table, nodding along, like she was listening to weather forecasts instead of watching her child get erased. I remember waiting for the punchline, waiting for someone to say this was a lesson or a threat or a scare tactic meant to straighten me out. But it never came. My dad slid an envelope across the table. Inside was my birth certificate, my social security card, and a folded piece of paper with a list of rules written in my mom's handwriting. The last rule was underlined twice: do not contact us unless spoken to first. That was when it sank in. This wasn't discipline. This was dismissal. I didn't cry right away. I nodded because nodding was easier than begging. I stood up because sitting felt like agreeing with them. I went to my room and packed a backpack with whatever fit: 2 shirts, a hoodie, my laptop charger, and a notebook I'd been writing in since high school. When I walked back through the living room, my mom finally looked at me. Her face wasn't angry or sad. It was relieved. Like something inconvenient had finally taken care of itself. The door closed behind me with a soft click that felt louder than any slam. I stood on the porch for a second, staring at the house I'd grown up in, realizing I didn't even know where I was supposed to go. I had $42 in my bank account, no car, and a phone that was about to get shut off. Friends had dorms and parents who helped them move in. I had a backpack and a sidewalk. That first night, I slept on a friend's floor. He didn't ask many questions, and I didn't volunteer answers. The next week blurred together into a series of couches, awkward silences, and job applications that never got replies. Every time I filled out a form asking for an emergency contact, my chest tightened. I left it blank. I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself independence was freedom. That's what my parents always preached after all. Stand on your own. Don't rely on anyone. I just hadn't realized they meant immediately. What hurt most wasn't the lack of money or the uncertainty. It was the speed with which they erased me. No texts asking if I'd eaten. No calls to check where I was sleeping. No, we're disappointed, but we love you. Just silence. A clean break. Like I died, except funerals at least acknowledge the loss. I promised myself something during those first weeks. I didn't know how I'd survive or where I'd end up, but I knew one thing for certain. I would never beg my way back into a place that had thrown me out so easily. If they were done with me, then I would be done proving myself to them. They thought disowning me would be the end of my story. What they didn't know was that it was the first time in my life I was finally forced to write it myself. If you were me, standing there at 18 with no safety net and no family to fall back on, would you believe this was rock bottom? Or would you have felt just barely that strange quiet space where something else could begin? Asterisk, the weeks after that felt like living inside a long, unfinished sentence. Every day started with uncertainty and ended with exhaustion, and in between, I learned how quickly pride turns into hunger. I took the first job that said yes. A night shift at a warehouse where the lights never fully shut off and the air smelled like cardboard and sweat. The pay was barely enough, but it was something. And something was better than staring at my phone waiting for another rejection email. I worked until my hands ached and my back screamed, then walked back to whatever couch or floor was available that night, telling myself this was temporary. Everything had to be temporary or I wouldn't survive it. I stopped posting online. It felt wrong to let people see how far I'd fallen, but it also felt dangerous to let my parents peek into my life through mutual contacts. I didn't want them to know whether I was okay or not. I wanted them to feel the same silence they had given me. Still, late at night, when the city noise softened and my body finally slowed down, I thought about them more than I wanted to admit. Not in a nostalgic way. More like pressing on a bruise just to remind myself it existed. 3 months in, my phone buzzed with a message from my mom. Just one sentence. "Have you come to your senses yet?" I stared at the screen for a long time before locking my phone and putting it face down. I didn't reply. I couldn't decide if answering would feel like surrender or relief, and I wasn't ready for either. That was when I understood something uncomfortable. They didn't miss me. They missed control. They missed the version of me that fit neatly into their expectations and reflected well on them. The moment I stopped doing that, I became disposable. I moved out of my friend's place when the tension became too heavy to ignore. It wasn't his fault. He had his own life, his own bills, his own worries. I found a tiny room in a shared apartment with people who didn't ask questions as long as rent showed up on time. The walls were thin, the kitchen always smelled like someone else's dinner, and my bed was a mattress on the floor, but it was mine. For the first time since being kicked out, I could close the door and know no one would tell me to leave. I started picking up extra shifts. I said yes when people said no. I learned how to stretch $1 until it felt like a skill. Cheap noodles, discount bread, coffee that tasted burnt but kept me awake. I kept my notebook with me everywhere, writing down small victories so I wouldn't forget them. First full month of rent paid on time. First night I slept 8 hours straight. First time a supervisor told me I was reliable. They were small things, but they were proof. Proof that I wasn't the failure my parents had labeled me around that time. An opportunity appeared in a place I didn't expect. One of my coworkers noticed me staying late, asking questions, volunteering for the jobs nobody wanted. He asked what I wanted to do long term. No one had asked me that in years. I told him the truth. I didn't know yet. I just knew I didn't want to be disposable ever again. He laughed, not unkindly, and told me about a certification program the company reimbursed if he passed. It would mean more hours, more studying, more exhaustion. But it also meant a path forward. I signed up that same week. Studying after 10-hour shifts was brutal. There were nights I fell asleep with my notes still open, my head resting on the table. There were moments I almost quit, telling myself I was aiming too high, that people like me were supposed to settle. Every time that thought crept in, I imagined my parents telling their friends how I'd thrown my life away. That image didn't break me. It fueled me. When I passed the certification, the email came through during my break. I read it 3 times to make sure I wasn't misreading it. Approved, eligible for promotion, reimbursement processed. I sat there with my back against a loading dock wall and laughed until my eyes burned. Not because I'd won, but because for the first time since being disowned, I felt like I was building something that couldn't be taken away with a single conversation. The promotion didn't make me rich. It didn't magically fix my life, but it did something more important. It proved momentum was real. One step led to another. Better shifts, better pay, fewer nights counting coins. I moved into a small studio, barely bigger than my old room at my parents' house, but the difference was ownership. No one could tell me to pack a bag and disappear. A year passed. Then another. I didn't reach out to my parents. They didn't reach out to me either, not really. Occasionally, my mom would send a message that sounded polite on the surface, but sharp underneath. Hope you're doing well. We heard you're still in the city. Always statements, never questions. Always distance disguised as concern. By the time I was 21, my life looked nothing like it had at 18. I had a stable job, a routine, a circle of people who knew me not as a disappointment, but as a person. I wasn't angry all the time anymore. The anger had cooled into something steadier, determination. I didn't wake up thinking about revenge. I woke up thinking about the future, and that's when everything shifted again. One afternoon, my manager called me into his office and closed the door. He told me the company was expanding, that they needed someone to oversee a new team, and that my name had come up more than once. He asked if I was interested. Interested didn't even cover it. This wasn't just another step. This was proof that the version of me my parents had rejected was capable of more than they ever imagined. I walked home that night with my head buzzing, replaying the conversation, imagining what my life could look like in another few years if I kept going. I didn't know that word was already spreading. I didn't know my parents were starting to hear my name again, not as a warning, but as a quiet surprise. The promotion came with a new schedule and a new level of visibility. Suddenly, my opinions mattered. People asked for my input instead of handing me instructions. I wore cleaner clothes, slept regular hours, and stopped flinching every time my phone buzzed. With stability came something I hadn't expected: space to think. When survival isn't your full-time job anymore, memories get louder. I started thinking about my parents in a different way. Not with the sharp pain of rejection, but with a kind of detached curiosity. How were they explaining my absence now? What story had they told themselves to justify cutting me off so completely? I got my answer sooner than I thought. One evening, as I was leaving work, a coworker mentioned my last name and paused. He asked, half joking, if I was related to a couple he knew through a local charity board. My stomach dropped. It was a common enough name, but the details lined up too neatly. I laughed it off and changed the subject, but the thought stayed with me all night. If my parents were hearing my name through other people, then the distance they relied on was shrinking. A week later, my mom called. Not a text, not a vague message, a call. I watched it ring until it stopped. Then she called again. On the third attempt, something in me shifted. Not hope, not fear, control. I answered. She didn't say my name at first. She said hello like we'd spoken yesterday. Like the last 3 years hadn't happened. She asked how I was, how work was, whether I was eating enough. The questions felt rehearsed, like lines she practiced in front of a mirror. I listened without interrupting, letting the silence stretch when she finally stopped talking. When I spoke, my voice was calm in a way that surprised even me. I told her I was fine, that I was busy, but I hoped she was well. I didn't offer details. I didn't ask questions. The imbalance unsettled her. She cleared her throat and said she'd heard I was doing well, that people had mentioned me, that she and my dad were proud. The word landed between us, heavy and late. Proud, as if pride was a gift they could still give on their own schedule. I thanked her politely and told her I had to go. When I hung up, my hands weren't shaking. I didn't feel small. I felt distant, and for the first time, that distance belonged to me. Over the next few months, the pattern repeated. Occasional calls, carefully worded messages, invitations framed as opportunities to reconnect, never apologies. They talked about how hard those years had been for them, how confused they were by my choices, how relieved they were to see I'd turned out okay. I listened, absorbing the subtext. They weren't reaching out because they regretted what they'd done. They were reaching out because the outcome didn't match their narrative. The real moment came at a family event I had known about until someone tagged me in a photo online. A distant cousin's engagement party. In the background, unmistakably, were my parents. And standing near them in a suit that fit me better than I'd ever expected was me. Someone had posted a group photo from a charity gala my company sponsored. I hadn't thought much of it at the time. To my parents, it was a shock that my dad showed up at my door 2 days later. No warning, no call. I opened it and saw him standing there, older than I remembered, his confidence frayed at the edges. For a second, neither of us spoke. He looked past me into my apartment, taking in the clean lines, the quiet order, the evidence of a life that hadn't fallen apart. I could almost see the calculation happening behind his eyes. He told me he hadn't realized how serious I was about my independence. He said they thought disowning me would scare me into coming back, into apologizing, into falling back into line. He admitted they hadn't expected me to build something without them. There it was. The truth finally unwrapped. My success wasn't impressive to them. It was inconvenient. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I told him I was sorry things hadn't gone the way they planned. I told him I hoped they were well. When he asked if we could start over, I told him something that had taken me years to understand. Starting over requires admitting where you went wrong. It requires seeing the other person as more than a reflection of yourself. Until that happened, there was nothing to rebuild. He left without yelling, without threats, without closure. Just a nod and a quiet goodbye. I closed the door and leaned against it, not because I was weak, but because I was finished. They found out who I became through whispers, through photos, through other people's admiration. They found out too late to shape it, too late to claim it. I didn't become successful to punish them. I became successful because I had to. Because being discarded taught me the value of choosing myself. If you were standing where I am now, looking back at the people who disowned you when you were most vulnerable, would you let them rewrite the ending? Or would you understand that sometimes the strongest response isn't revenge or forgiveness, but simply becoming someone they no longer get to define? Asterisk, the strangest part of all of it was how normal my life felt after that. No dramatic showdown. No tearful reunion. Just days stacking on top of each other, steady and quiet. I went to work. I came home. I cooked dinner instead of surviving on whatever was cheapest. I started mentoring one of the newer hires, a kid about the same age I'd been when everything fell apart. He reminded me of myself in ways that were uncomfortable but grounding. Watching him slowly gain confidence, I realized how powerful simple consistency can be when someone hasn't had much of it. Every now and then, I'd hear updates about my parents through other people. How they talked about me now. How my name came up in conversations where it never used to. Apparently, my mom liked to say I was very independent and that they'd always known I'd succeed once I stopped being rebellious. I didn't correct the story. I didn't need to. Anyone who knew the truth didn't need convincing. And anyone who believed their version wasn't someone whose opinion held weight in my life anymore. What surprised me most was how little satisfaction I felt knowing they'd finally noticed. For a long time, I'd imagined that moment would feel like victory. That hearing their pride, seeing their regret would fill some hollow space inside me. But when it actually happened, it felt flat. The space they'd left wasn't meant to be filled by their approval. It had been filled already, piece by piece, by my own choices. There was one final conversation months later that closed the loop. My mom asked if we could meet for coffee. Neutral ground, she said. Like we were negotiating a business deal instead of a relationship she'd severed. I agreed, not because I wanted reconciliation, but because I wanted clarity. She talked a lot. About fear. About pressure. About how disowning me had seemed like the only option at the time. She framed it as a mistake made out of love, a hard decision meant to teach me resilience. I listened, then told her something she hadn't expected. I told her it had worked, just not the way she imagined. I told her losing them had forced me to learn resilience, but it had also taught me that love with conditions isn't safety. That being disowned at 18 showed me exactly how quickly support can vanish when it's tied to control. I told her I didn't hate her. I told her I wasn't angry anymore. But I also told her that the version of me she was meeting now existed because I'd learned to live without her, not because she prepared me for it. She cried. I didn't, not because I was cold, but because I was done grieving something that no longer existed. We finished our coffee and went our separate ways. No promises. No dramatic conclusions. Just honesty. Looking back, I understand something I couldn't at 18. Being disowned didn't break me. It clarified everything. It stripped away the illusion that approval equals love, that family automatically means safety, that obedience guarantees belonging. I learned that becoming someone isn't about proving others wrong. It's about refusing to disappear when they expect you to. My parents found out who I became after they gave up the right to shape it. They saw the results without being part of the process. And that's the part they still struggle with. They want the ending without acknowledging the beginning. But life doesn't work that way. So if you're listening to this and you've been cut off, written off, or told you don't belong, hear this. The moment someone decides you are disposable is not the moment your story ends. It's the moment their influence does. What comes next is slower, harder, and quieter than revenge. It looks like persistence. Like growth no one applauds at first. Like becoming undeniable without asking permission. And one day, whether they admit it or not, the people who walked away will hear your name again. Not as a warning, not as a disappointment, but as proof that letting go of you was the most expensive mistake they ever made.